How to identify a verb. When you're studying another language the way we are, which is grammar-based and text-based, the verbs are really, really important. They are the engine of the sentence. So for example, if you have these nouns, I in the test, past versus failed, the nouns haven't changed at all, but wow, the relationship between them has changed completely. Or alternatively, past versus will pass, pretty different relationship. Your mom would be pretty happy with I passed the test, but not so much about the will pass because there's some doubt in the future tense. Unfortunately, when you're studying verbs in a Romance language, the verbs are often the hardest thing to identify because Romance languages are built on identifying the base of a verb and the endings. So passer puts us in the past tense. Passerai, you just add two little letters here with that E and the R, and now you're in the conditional. You take off one little letter, that T, or two of them, the I and the T, take them off here, and you just have the A, and now you're in the future. So you can't guess about the verbs. You have to be able to take your time, look at them, and identify what they're telling you if you're going to improve your reading comprehension. So we're going to approach our verb study very systematically. We're looking at the 5 elements that you use when you identify a verb. The first one is person, and you have aller conjugated here with our pronouns, and person goes across. So we have je, and we have nous going across. Those things are identified as the first person, just abbreviated with a P. Tu and vous are spoken of in grammatical terms as the second person. Il, elle, and on, and il and elle plural are called the third person. Second element is number, and that's an easy one because you have only 2. It's either going to be singular or it's going to be plural. Person went across. Je and nous were the first, tu and vous were the second, il, elle, on, il and elle plural were the third. Number goes up and down. Je, tu, il, elle, and on are singular, and plural, the nous, vous, and il, elle plural. So we'll do a little quick recap of person and number, our first 2 elements. Il pense would be third person going across, singular, il pense. Nous achetons is first person, plural. On is third person, singular. And be careful with this one because even though on can translate as we or you or sometimes even they, it conjugates like il and elle singular. So always identify on as third person, singular. Vous is a little tricky. Vous is always going to be second person, but it's not always clear which one it is. Since vous can be used as a polite term of address for one person or a term of address for many people, you can't always tell. If you don't have any context, you can pick either singular or plural. Number 3, tense tells us when the verb occurs. For right now, we're just going to be dealing with the present tense. Eventually, we'll get about 9 tenses, but for right now, you'll just be identifying verbs as the present tense. Mood is the oddest one of the bunch. It's a weird word used to describe verbs, but what it means is a way to identify the speaker's attitude towards the verb, towards what is being said. So, for instance, in this sentence here, I live in America, live, and this sentence, I live on Mars, only one of those sentences is true, but it doesn't matter for grammar. As far as the grammar is concerned, these 2 sentences are equivalent. The speaker is expressing a feeling of certainty, stating this thing as if it were a fact, even if it isn't a fact, even if it's clearly not true, it doesn't matter for grammar. So this thing is called the indicative mood, for things that are stated as facts by the speaker, even if the speaker knows they're not true or the listeners know that they're not true. It's still indicative. He speaks French. This is the easy one. Question mark kind of gives it away. The speaker does not address this sentence as if it were fact. The speaker is indicating by asking a question that she doesn't know the answer. So the mood that we use for questions is the interrogative mood. And this is an easy one to remember if you just think about interrogate, asking questions. And you can see how if I take this out and I put in a period, now I have an indicative mood. He speaks French. I'm stating it as if it's fact, even if it's not true. Even if he doesn't speak French, it doesn't matter for grammar. The grammar says you're stating it as if it is a fact. It is therefore indicative. But I put back in my question mark, and now I have the interrogative. This last one is one that we're going to do more with later on, but it's a good way to understand the idea of mood if we take a look at this example. It is important that you learn French. So here, if we look back to our other 2 moods, indicative or interrogative, it's clearly not the interrogative because there's no question mark, but why is it indicative? Because the speaker is stating this as if it were a fact. The speaker believes it to be true. It is important, no doubt. The is the indicative. But this thing over here, it's important that you learn French. Looks like the indicative, there's no question mark, but the learn is going to be identified as subjunctive. And again, we'll do subjunctive later, but essentially what the subjunctive means is that it's the mood used for words or verbs that are not facts. So thinking about that in relationship to the indicative, it is important. The speaker is saying that part as if it were fact. But the learning French, I don't know, maybe you'll learn it, maybe you won't. I don't know about that. That's not for sure true as far as I'm concerned as the speaker. So is going to be the indicative mood, third person singular for the it, and then the learn will be in the subjunctive, which we will cover later on. Okay, let's do a little quick recap of our first four elements: person, number, tense, and mood. J'écris une lettre à mes grands-parents. So here's my verb, and here's my subject for je. If I go according to my order, person is going to be first person, number is going to be singular, je is only one person, tense is present tense, and the mood is indicative. I'm stating this as a fact. I may be lying, maybe I never write to them, but I'm stating it as if it's a fact, and therefore this is an indicative mood sentence. Il est important qu'ils arrivent à l'heure. Il est important. Third person singular for the il. Tense is present tense, and the mood is indicative. It is important, even if that turned out not to be true. The speaker is saying it as if it were true, as if it were a fact. This thing over here, and again, we're going to get to this a little bit later, would be, if we just do the identification of the first three, third person, plural, this is more than one, it's present, but its mood is going to be subjunctive because the speaker does not know that this is a fact. The speaker is simply saying, it's important that this thing happened, but I don't really know if it's true. This one's the easy one because you can see the question mark, so person is going to be second person. Number, a little tricky, it could be singular, it could be plural, we'd need more for the sentence. The tense is present, and the mood is indicative. Interrogative, sorry. Our final element of the 5 elements is voice, and you have two choices here. You have the active, which means that the subject is doing the action of the verb. And this is, you have to kind of think of action in a broader sense. Here we have il and joue. So I have il is my third person singular subject. My joue is in the present tense. It's indicative, I'm stating it as a fact. And the voice is active. And all that means is that you look at the verb joue and who's doing it? Il. That's my subject. That means I have a nice active sentence. Subject is doing the action of the verb. Here, though, you can see how croire is a slightly different kind of verb. Joue is something visible, something that really happens in the world that I can see and interact with. Croire is not. He believes in ghosts. Well, it's not really an action, but for grammar, it doesn't matter. This is the verb that we've got. Who's doing the croire-ing? Who's doing the believing? That's the il, and il is my subject. Third person singular, present, indicative, active. If I put a question mark over here, I'd have everything the same, except that my mood would be interrogative. The second choice that I have for voice is the passive. And what that means is that the subject of the sentence is not doing the action of the verb, but the subject is being acted upon by somebody else, either in the sentence or not. So this is hard for us because English likes this structure and French doesn't really like it. It's possible to use it, but as we'll see here in a second, French has a way of getting around it that's much nicer and neater. So this sentence, souvent les serpents sont vus comme mauvais. Often snakes are seen as bad. So here's my subject, serpent, and here's my verb, sont, but the whole verb is sont vus. Snakes are seen as bad. This is passive because my subject, serpent, is not doing anything, it's just sitting there. And someone who's not mentioned in this sentence is seeing the snakes as bad. Now if I want, I could put in who it is who's doing that. I could say, sont vus comme mauvais par tout le monde. I still have a passive sentence because my subject hasn't changed. My subject is still serpent, and they are not doing anything. They're sitting there, and someone else, whether I put them in tout le monde or whether I leave them out, is doing the action of the viewing, of the looking at, and the serpent are not. English really likes this structure. French doesn't, so you have to kind of get your mind out of that passive structure sentence. And luckily, French gives you a way to do that with the lovely pronoun on. English doesn't have that. We don't have anything that we can use as a pronoun when we don't know who we're talking about, but French does. If French doesn't know who's looking at the serpents this way, they don't have to go this route of the passive voice. You can just turn the whole thing around, give yourself a pronoun, on, I don't know who that is, that's its value, and then I can have a nice active verb. On voit souvent les serpents comme mauvais. And this is a really good thing for you guys to do, because looking back up here, if we're going to use this verb, sont, and you remember what kind of verb that is, that's a linking verb. What do linking verbs do? They link nouns and their adjectives. In a passive voice, the adjective becomes part of the verb. And English says, who cares? Are seen. Seen is going to be seen no matter what my subject is. And French says, oh la la, I don't think so. This is now an adjective. You know what happens to adjectives in French? You have to make the agreement. Well, my subject is plural, so I better put an S over here. If you do this with the on, you don't have to worry about anything. It's just on voit, a nice active verb with our third person singular subject. And here's our verb in the indicative. On voit, third person singular, present, indicative, active. Up here, my sont vu, if I identified it, would be third person, because my subject is serpent, third person plural. It is present, it is indicative, it's stated as a fact, but it's passive. So we have full identification of the verb, then is going to be person, number, tense, mood, and voice. Stop the recording for a second, try out these 4 sentences and see if you get them right. So this first one, ils finissent, is our verb. So it's il with the plural, so third person plural, it's present, it's indicative, and it's active. Subject of my sentence is il, and the il is doing the action of the verb finir. Mangez-vous des escargots? Person is going to be vous, second person. I don't really know if it's singular or plural, so again, you need more context. The tense is present. The mood is going to be interrogative, because I don't know if you eat them, and you have the nice question mark. And the voice is going to be active, because even though it's a question, the vous is still doing the action of the verb. À Paris, le métro est pris souvent. Here's my subject, métro, and here's my verb, est pris. So my person is third person singular, which is métro. My tense is present. My mood is indicative. It's stated as if it were a fact, but the voice is passive. The metro is the subject of the sentence, but it is not doing anything. It's just sitting there, and it's being taken, right? The est pris is taken often. It's being taken by people who are not in the sentence. I could put that in there, par les Parisiens, but it's still a passive sentence. The subject of the sentence is still métro, and the métro is not doing the action of the verb. And our last one here, il est important que j'écoute mon prof. Il est, third person, singular, present, indicative, active. J'écoute is going to be first person, singular, present, and it's not indicative now. It's going to be the subjunctive, because I don't know whether it's important that I do it. It's just I'm saying it's important, but I don't know that I'm going to actually do it. It's an active verb because my subject is doing the action of the verb. So for part B on your homework worksheet, you're going to identify the conjugated form of the verb that you wrote in part A. So if you're looking at the worksheet, you can see in part A there were blanks, and you had to go in and identify, you had to conjugate the verbs in the present tense. Part B, I'm asking you to look at those verbs from part A, but I didn't write in the conjugated form because I want you to do that in part A. So let's say, for example, you had il finir. That's not actually one of the verbs in your on your worksheet there, but let's just pretend for a second. Il finir. So here's what you're going to write. You're going to rewrite what you wrote in part A. You're going to conjugate it in the present tense, and then you're going to identify it by person, number, tense, mood, and voice. So first do the il finir, and then you'd start in. Person is third person. That's person. Then number is going to be singular. You can abbreviate it if you want. So we have person, number, tense is going to be the present tense. Person, number, tense, mood is going to be the indicative, if it were, let's say it was in the sentence, and then whether it's passive or whether it's active. In this case, it's going to be active because the subject, il, is doing the action of the verb. So that's it for verb identification. Get that pattern in your mind, person, number, tense, mood, voice. We're going to be identifying our verbs like that quite often because that helps us get the engine of the sentence precise, and then we can fill in the other stuff for the nouns and the adverbs and the articles after that. But we have to get the heart of the sentence right first.